Lawyers, what made you think my client is pure evil? Story 1. Worked in forensic psych assessment. Thought I'd seen everything until this case. Woman starved 3 adopted kids so badly they needed weeks of hospitalization. Got out of prison? Know what she did next? Married a guy with kids so she could start over with a fresh set. The interview still haunts me. She sat there, perfectly calm, explaining how she was helping them be healthy and beautiful. No remorse, no understanding, just this twisted logic where starvation was care and skeleton children were her success stories. They needed me, she said about the first set. No one else would understand them like I did. The photos from the first case, I wasn't on it, but I saw them. 4- and 5-year-olds looking like concentration camp survivors. Ribs you could count from across the room. Eyes sunken so deep they looked like skulls with skin. The worst part? She'd brainwashed them completely. These babies believed only she could love them. Even while she was killing them slowly, they thought she was saving them. Then she gets out, finds a single dad, and starts the whole process again. The second set of kids were rescued earlier, but the pattern was identical. Smaller portions. They don't need that much. Then no portions. They're not really hungry, just greedy. During our evaluation, she spoke about food like it was poison and starvation like it was medicine. In her mind, every withheld meal was an act of love. This wasn't insanity, this was something worse. She knew exactly what she was doing, she just thought everyone else was wrong. But here's the thing that really messed with me, another case entirely. Guy commits a horrible crime, cries insanity. We evaluate him for weeks. Everyone from techs to psychiatrists agree this man is not mentally ill. He's just evil. Know what happened? Released. No time served. State wanted to give him a chance. This man literally smeared feces all over his room and hid it in the walls. Not because he was crazy, because he was angry we wouldn't validate his insanity plea. Calculated nastiness disguised as mental illness. That's when I dropped out of my forensic psych doctoral program. Some people can't be fixed because they're not broken. They're just wrong. And the system sometimes can't tell the difference. The starvation woman? She genuinely believed she was a savior. The feces smearer? He knew exactly what he was doing and played the system perfectly. I've seen genuinely sick people get treatment and transform their lives. Beautiful success stories. But I've also seen predators use mental illness as a costume. And worse, I've seen true believers who think torture is care. Now I work in a different field entirely. Some puzzles aren't worth solving when the pieces are made of other people's nightmares. Those kids from both sets are in therapy now. The woman is back in prison. The feces guy is probably out there somewhere, looking for his next chance. Sometimes I wonder which is worse, the ones who know they're monsters or the ones who think they're saints. Story 2. Used to work as a solicitor's representative. Basically, I handled paperwork and client meetings while barristers did the court stuff. This case still sticks with me. 70-something-year-old guy. Been in prison 15 years for assaulting a child. His legal team had been working on getting him released. Clean reports from everyone, model prisoner, the works. Seemed like a straightforward, compassionate release case. Then came the dentist appointment. Guards took him out for dental work. Normal procedure. He walks into the waiting room, sees 2 kids sitting there, and immediately charges straight at them. Full sprint. Guards tackled him before he reached them. 3 weeks later, I'm the one sitting across from him in a small room. He thought this was his release hearing. He'd been telling everyone how excited he was to start fresh. I had to explain that no, this wasn't a release hearing. This was a committal hearing. He wasn't going home. He was going to a secure mental facility. For life. But I've been good, he kept saying. 15 years, I've been good. The dentist waiting room proved he hadn't changed. He'd just been contained. He did not take the news well. Screaming, crying, begging, the whole performance. I felt nothing. 15 years of good behavior meant nothing when the first time he saw children in the wild, his immediate instinct was to attack. The guards saved those kids from finding out what starting fresh meant to him. Sometimes the system works. Sometimes monsters reveal themselves at exactly the right moment. Sometimes a routine dental appointment saves lives. He'll die in that facility. Good. Some cases you go home and think about. Some make you question the system. This one, I went home and slept like a baby. Those 2 kids in that waiting room will never know how close they came to being his fresh start. Story 3. The Missing Provision. 90-year-old client, senile, owned land worth just under $1 billion. Every vulture in a 3-piece suit started circling, but the worst one? My own managing partner. This man, who'd built his career on integrity and protecting vulnerable clients, saw a confused elderly man with a $1 billion asset, and his eyes turned into dollar signs. The partner drafted a provision, buried in subsection after subsection of legal jargon, would have funneled 60% of the sale proceeds, $600 million, directly to him, not the firm, him. For extensive consultation and management fees, he called it. The old man could barely remember his own name, let alone catch sophisticated legal theft in a 200-page document. I was assigned to do revisions, normal stuff, formatting, citations, cleaning up language. But there it was, this poisonous little provision, sitting between standard clauses like a snake in the grass. The partner kept checking in. How are those revisions coming? Make sure you don't change Section 47B. His eyes would literally gleam like a cartoon villain. Getting lost in revisions is a beautiful thing. Oops, did I accidentally delete that entire section while reformatting? Oh no, did the pagination get messed up and now that provision is somehow missing? Such a shame when technology fails us. Where's Section 47B? He asked during review. Must have gotten lost in the revisions. I'll check the previous draft. Well, add it back in. Of course, right away. I did not add it back in. The deal went through. Old man got his money. Well, his estate did. Family members who actually gave a damn about him. Partner got his standard fees, which were substantial, but not steal $600 million substantial. He knew I knew. I knew he knew I knew. But what's he going to do? Complain that his attempt to rob a senile client mysteriously vanished? Your Honor, I tried to steal $600 million, but my associate wouldn't let me? He made my life hell for the next year. Petty assignments, bad performance reviews, the works. Worth it. Eventually, I left for another firm. During my exit interview, HR asked why I was leaving. Philosophical differences, I said. Like the difference between lawyers and thieves. The old man passed away 6 months later. His family sent a nice thank you card to the firm for handling the sale so professionally. If only they knew, their biggest danger wasn't the buyers or the market or the complex legal issues. It was the man whose name was on the door. Provisions get lost in revisions all the time. Sometimes that's the best thing that can happen to them. Story 4. My psych professor used to evaluate criminals for insanity pleas in Arkansas. Guy had seen everything. Serial killers, cannibals, the whole spectrum of human darkness. But only one inmate ever made the hairs on his neck stand up. The glass man. This guy would take shards of glass from anywhere he could find them and slide them under his skin. Not to hurt himself, to save them. Like a squirrel storing nuts for winter, except the nuts were glass and winter was whenever he decided to use them. The professor said you couldn't tell by looking at him. Normal-looking guy, calm, polite even. But if you knew where to look, you could see the slight bumps, little ridges under the skin where he'd tucked away his collection. How many? My professor had asked during the evaluation. Enough, the guy answered. During the interview, the man sat perfectly still, answered questions normally, discussed his crimes like discussing the weather. But every so often, he'd absently run his fingers over his arms, checking his inventory. What really got my professor was the planning. This wasn't impulsive behavior. The guy had been collecting for months, different sizes, different sharpness levels, some in his arms, some in his legs, a whole arsenal waiting under his skin for the opportune time. "Doesn't it hurt?" the professor asked. "Everything hurts," the man replied. "This hurts with purpose." The guards knew about it but couldn't do much. Metal detectors don't catch glass. Strip searches don't reveal what's under the skin unless you're really looking, and nobody wanted to get close enough to really look. The professor's assessment? Absolutely sane. Completely aware of his actions. The glass wasn't insanity. It was patience. That's what made the professor's skin crawl. Not the craziness, but the calculated sanity of it all. This man had turned his own body into a weapon storage facility and was just waiting. Did he ever use them? We asked. Professor wouldn't say, just moved on to the next topic. But sometimes, when discussing impulse control or delayed gratification, he'd absently rub his arms, like he was checking for bumps that weren't there. Some people's crazy is loud and obvious. Others carry it quietly under their skin, waiting for the opportune time. The glass man got life without parole. Somewhere, he's still sitting, still collecting, still waiting. Story 5. Worked environmental services at an urgent care in the middle of nowhere, literally built on an old horse field. Usually got minor stuff, sprained ankles, flu shots, boring appointments. Then one day, this kid gets rushed in from a nearby rodeo. Bull trampled him, rib puncturing his lung. Kids dying right there in our little urgent care that barely had equipment for stitches. Nearest real hospital? 30, 40 minutes away, depending on traffic. This boy didn't have 30 minutes, didn't have 10. The primary care doc, this woman, just switched into another mode, like watching Clark Kent find a phone booth. She grabbed whatever supplies we had and MacGyvered a chest tube setup. I don't know the exact medical terms, but basically she punched a tube through the wound, reinflated his lung, and rigged some kind of makeshift seal that would keep him stable for transport. The kid was conscious through this, conscious while she's threading tubes through his ribs. His eyes were huge, breathing in these tiny gasps, but he never screamed, just gripped the table. His family in the waiting room sounded like they were at a funeral already, wailing, praying, the works. Then she walks out, blood on her scrubs, cool as ice. He's stable, ambulance is 3 minutes out. The explosion of relief from that family, from funeral to celebration in one sentence. What got me was how calm everyone stayed. The doc never raised her voice. The nurses moved like they'd done this 1,000 times. Meanwhile, I'm just trying not to pass out while mopping up blood, watching them save this kid's life with the medical equivalent of duct tape and prayer. Kid lived. Heard later he made a full recovery. But that image stays with me. This doctor, in a tiny urgent care meant for sore throats and sprained ankles, just deciding, not today, and building a functional lung repair out of whatever was in the supply closet. Some people see a dying kid and panic. Some people see a dying kid and become MacGyver with a medical degree. I cleaned rooms. She cleaned death's clock. The rodeo continued the next day, because of course it did. That's rodeo people for you. Someone nearly dies, and they're like, well, that was unfortunate. Next rider. But somewhere there's a kid walking around with working lungs because one doctor in BFE refused to let geography determine his fate. Heroes wear scrubs sometimes, and sometimes they're covered in blood when they tell you everything's going to be okay. Story 6. Had a teacher in high school who used to be a lawyer. We pestered him constantly about why he quit. Why give up lawyer money for teacher salary? One day he finally told us. His last case was defending 3 people. There used to be 4. 2 couples having a drug-fueled party that went from 0 to cannibalistic murder. They killed one of the women, ate parts of her, dismembered what was left. Seemed like a good idea at the time, one of them had told him. Even retelling it years later, his eyes went somewhere else, that 1,000-yard stare you see in war documentaries. He said the case was open and shut, the evidence was overwhelming, but as their lawyer, he had to give them the best defense possible, which meant studying every photo, reading every deranged justification, sitting across from them as they explained their reasoning like they were discussing a restaurant choice. I had to look at those pictures every day, he said, had to hear them describe it, had to stand next to them in court and argue for their humanity when they'd completely abandon it. The worst part wasn't even the crime, it was how casual they were about it. 3 people who'd crossed a line so fundamental that they couldn't even see it anymore. He won them life instead of death, did his job, got them the best result possible. Then he went home, looked at his law degree, and never practiced again. Sometimes winning isn't winning, he told our silent classroom. Sometimes doing your job perfectly means living with things you can't unsee. Now he teaches high school government, makes a third of what he used to, grades papers instead of crime scene photos, deals with teenage drama instead of literal cannibals. When students complain about his strict grading, he gets this tiny smile, like he's thinking, "Kid, you have no idea what a real problem looks like." He was a great teacher, probably because he'd seen what happens when society's rules completely break down, when it seemed like a good idea at the time ends with eating your friend. Some people can compartmentalize that stuff. Others teach high school and try to make sure the next generation understands why we have laws in the first place. Every lawyer has a case that haunts them. His just happened to be his last. Story 7. My mom quit being a public defender over one case. When you're a PD, you don't choose your clients. The court assigns, you defend. That's the deal. She defended thieves, dealers, assault cases, never loved it, but she understood everyone deserves representation. Then she got assigned this couple. Young guy and his girlfriend had answered a free to a good home ad for a kitten. Told the owner they'd always wanted a pet. Seemed like nice kids. They took it home and gave it to their dog as a chew toy. And filmed it. My mom had to sit across from this guy, had to review the evidence, had to discuss defense strategies for something so evil it shouldn't even need a law against it. He was proud of it, she told me years later, kept wanting to explain why it was funny. She said she needed a shower after every meeting, not metaphorically, literally went home and stood under scalding water, trying to wash off whatever spiritual filth comes from defending someone who tortures kittens for entertainment. She did her job, got him the best deal she could, because that's what the Constitution requires. But the second that case closed, she canceled her public defender contract. 20 years of criminal defense ended because of one couple who thought animal torture was worth recording. Now she does estate planning, wills and trusts. The most violence she sees is families fighting over money. Says it's still ugly sometimes, but at least nobody's proud of being awful. Everyone deserves a defense. She still believes that. But she also believes she doesn't have to be the one providing it, not after sitting across from someone explaining why giving a kitten to a dog as a toy was hilarious. Some cases change you. Some cases make you realize there are things you can't wash off in the shower. She kept her law license, changed her life. The couple got probation and community service. The video was destroyed as evidence. Sometimes justice and humanity are different things. Mom chose humanity. Story 8. The Corn Silo. Did prison legal aid for years. Could tell you child molester stories that make you sick. Instead, here's a different kind of nightmare. My client was 17, mildly cognitively disabled from brain trauma, courtesy of his birth parents. His foster family was amazing, though. Kid thrived. Popular at school, good athlete, had a girlfriend. One night, he invites her to hang out in a corn silo. Apparently, that's what country kids do for privacy. I'm reading this in his pre-sentence report, trying to figure out where this goes wrong. By his account, they were having a great time, laughing, talking, being teenagers. Then, for absolutely no reason he could explain, he picked up a 2x4 and caved her skull in. No argument, no trigger, no explanation. Just went from normal teenager to killer between one breath and the next. What happened after was worse. He used farm tools, shovels, hose, whatever was around, to dismember her body, buried the pieces in the corn, then went home and had dinner with his foster family like it was any other night. When I met with him, he seemed genuinely confused about why he did it. Not remorseful exactly, just puzzled. Like his brain had briefly switched channels to static, and when it came back, there was a dead girl in front of him. "I was happy," he kept saying. "She was nice. I don't know why I did it." The foster family was destroyed. They'd given this kid everything: love, stability, a future. Now they're sitting in court watching him get sentenced for butchering a girl in a corn silo for literally no reason. His cognitive disability meant he qualified for certain programs instead of straight prison, but no program fixes whatever wire crossed in his brain that night. No therapy explains why a happy moment turned into murder. The girl's family had to hear how she died, had to know her last moments were with someone she trusted in a place she felt safe, until she suddenly wasn't. I did my job, got him the best outcome possible given the circumstances. But this case haunts me differently than the others. With child molesters, there's evil you can point to, a pattern, something wrong you can identify. This was a broken brain that broke at exactly the wrong moment. A nice kid on a date who became a killer because some damaged neural pathway finally snapped. Sometimes there's no why. Sometimes trauma from infancy surfaces decades later in ways nobody can predict. Sometimes a corn silo becomes a crime scene for no better reason than a broken mind finally breaking all the way. The foster family still sends him letters. They don't understand either. Nobody does. Story 9. Represented a divorce client who made every other nightmare client look reasonable. This guy hadn't worked in 12 years but demanded all of his wife's retirement. Disowned his autistic son completely. Wouldn't even acknowledge the kid existed. But that was just the warm-up. During Hurricane Sandy, while the Bronx and Manhattan were getting hammered, this man called me. Not to check if I was safe, to demand I hold his wife in contempt for not paying him that day, during a literal natural disaster. "The storm is no excuse," he screamed over hurricane winds. My wedding was 4 days after Sandy. When he found out, he spent 20 minutes telling me I was making a huge mistake, that I'd be miserable, that marriage was a trap. "You'll regret it," he kept saying. "Mark my words." Then things got dark. His divorce was taking too long for his liking, so he sent death threat letters to me and my wife. Said he'd hired an executor to kill us both if his divorce wasn't finalized in 60 days. 60 days? Like divorce court runs on mob deadlines? Called the police immediately. Turns out he'd fled his apartment the day before, completely vanished. Heard nothing for months, was constantly looking over my shoulder, checking locks, worrying about my wife. Then, out of nowhere, February 2014, an email. "Hi, I need a winter coat from my wife. Can you help arrange that?" Like he hadn't threatened to have us murdered, like we were just going to coordinate wardrobe exchanges after death threats. The divorce never had to be finalized. He killed himself before the judge signed the papers. Looking back, he was clearly spiraling. The anger, the threats, the bizarre requests, all signs of someone coming apart. But when you're getting death threats about court delays, sympathy takes a backseat to survival. Edit. Since people asked, a bonus story about my dumbest client. Memorial Day weekend, getting calls from a custody client. "It's urgent." I call her back, explain it's a holiday. Her response? "Oh, I didn't think Jews celebrated Memorial Day, so I thought you'd be available." Ma'am, it's Memorial Day for American war dead. What possible religious exemption would I have? Sorry, can't honor fallen soldiers, I'm Jewish. Sometimes the dangerous clients are easier than the dumb ones. Story 10. Knew a cop who needed major surgery. 3 months of desk duty while he recovered. Should have been easy time. Filing reports, answering phones, staying off his fate. Instead, they assigned him to the Child Exploitation Unit, specifically image analysis. Thousands of photos. His job was to look for identifying details, backgrounds, furniture, anything that might lead to victims or perpetrators. Wallpaper patterns, toy brands, school uniforms, the horrible puzzle pieces that might save a child. 3 months, 8 hours a day, looking at the worst things humans do to the smallest humans. He went in as a guy recovering from surgery. He came out different. Before those 3 months, he and his wife had been trying for kids. Nursery picked out, names chosen, the whole thing. After, he refused to have children. Period. No discussion. I can't, he told me. I've seen what can happen. I've seen what people do. His wife didn't understand at first. How could she? She hadn't spent months cataloging hell, hadn't memorized carpet patterns from crime scenes, hadn't become an expert in identifying toy brands from the worst possible contexts. They're divorced now. Some jobs change you, but there's a special kind of damage that comes from spending months looking for clues in images that shouldn't exist. Every child he saw on the street became a potential victim. Every adult became a potential predator. The whole world shifted into threat assessment mode. The surgery healed fine. Everything else didn't. He's still a cop, back on regular duty, but he'll never have kids. Because for 3 months, 8 hours a day, he saw exactly what monsters look like. And, more importantly, he learned they look like everyone else. Sometimes, desk duty is the hardest job on the force. Story 11. The Ironic Victory. Won a case on a procedural error. The prosecution had filing issues that undermined their entire argument. Complete dismissal. My client was overjumped, jumping up to hug me right there in the courtroom. That's when I noticed he had clearly been drinking that morning. Not from the night before, but fresh alcohol on his breath. The irony hit me immediately. Here was someone who had just beaten charges related to impaired driving, yet had driven to court while impaired. I maintained my composure until we reached the hallway, then quietly took his car keys. "What are you doing?" he asked, confused. "Calling someone to pick you up," I replied. "But we won." "That won't matter if you get arrested leaving the courthouse." I had to explain why celebrating a legal victory by repeating the alleged behavior wasn't the wisest choice. His family member who picked him up wasn't surprised. Apparently, this wasn't an isolated incident. Some people view legal victories as learning opportunities. Others see them as validation of poor choices. Unfortunately, my client fell into the latter category. He needed representation again 6 months later for similar charges. No procedural errors saved him that time. At least he arranged alternative transportation to that hearing. Small steps forward. Story 12. Professional boundaries. Defending people accused of serious crimes requires separating personal feelings from professional duty. Everyone deserves legal representation. However, some clients challenge those professional boundaries. I was reviewing a case involving allegations against a minor when the defendant began offering what he considered an explanation that placed responsibility on the child. I immediately stopped him. I explained clearly that there are no circumstances where such reasoning would be legally viable or ethically defensible. He seemed genuinely confused by my response, as if he expected me to agree with his perspective. I outlined his actual legal options. We could examine constitutional issues, procedural problems, or evidentiary concerns. We would not pursue any defense strategy that blamed a minor. Some clients expect their attorneys to validate their viewpoints. They're looking for someone to nod along with problematic reasoning. That's not how professional representation works. There are legal standards and ethical boundaries that guide defense strategy. He ultimately sought different representation, probably hoping to find someone more receptive to his approach. While everyone deserves legal defense, there are limits to the arguments all make in court. Professional ethics and basic human decency establish those boundaries. Some cases you take because representation is a fundamental right. Some clients you decline to continue with because certain lines shouldn't be crossed. Story 13. Represented a woman on grand theft charges. Should have seen this coming. Left her alone in my office for maybe 5 minutes while I went to make copies. Basic paperwork, routine stuff. Come back, finish our meeting, she leaves. I go to grab my keys to head to lunch. Gone. Check for my sunglasses, also gone. This woman stole from her lawyer while meeting about her theft charges in my own office. The balls on this one. I catch up to her in the lobby. She's casual, just strolling toward the exit with my Ray-Bans probably in her purse and my car keys jingling in her pocket. Empty your pockets, now. I don't know what you're talking about. You took my keys and sunglasses. I'm giving you one chance to give them back before I call the police, which would be ironic considering why you hired me. She tries to look offended. I can't believe you'd... I'm literally your theft attorney. I know what theft looks like. Pockets, now. The security guard is watching. Other lawyers are passing by. She realizes she's trapped. Slowly, she pulls out my sunglasses, then my keys, then, and I didn't even know this was missing, my letter opener. The letter opener was the chef's kiss, like she was just grabbing anything not nailed down. I was going to bring them back, she says. Sure, just like all those other items you're charged with stealing were borrowed. Told her to find a new lawyer, preferably one who bolts everything to their desk. The audacity of stealing from the person defending you for stealing. It's like punching your dentist while they're fixing your cavity. Some clients test the attorney-client relationship. This one robbed it. Story 14. Had a client who just finished 25 years for murder. 25 years. Quarter of a century behind bars. Gets released in the morning. By afternoon, he's in custody again. What did this genius do with his first day of freedom? Went to see a potential landlord about an apartment and beat the man so badly his eyeball popped out of the socket. Day 1. Not a week later, not a month, the same day. Sitting in my office, he's laughing about it. You should have seen his face. Well, half of it anyway. His eye was hanging down by his cheek. Zero remorse. Just pure amusement at partially blinding someone who was trying to rent him an apartment. This man spent 25 years supposedly rehabilitating and lasted approximately 6 hours in society before committing felony assault. The prison gates probably hadn't even finished closing behind him. I took it to trial because that's the job, but sitting next to him while he chuckled at the crime scene photos, while he mimicked the victim's screams, knowing this was his first day out? Some people aren't meant for society. This guy was Exit A. Jury deliberated for about 15 minutes. Guilty. Maximum sentence, another 10 years. He shrugged when they read the verdict, like he'd expected to go back anyway, like those 6 hours of freedom were just a brief intermission in his lifelong prison career. The landlord lost an eye. The state lost any faith in rehabilitation. And my client lost another decade because he couldn't go one day without violent felony assault. Some people defend people who made mistakes. Sometimes you defend people who are mistakes. 25 years of incarceration, and the only thing he learned was how to hit someone hard enough to disconnect their eyeball. Welcome back to prison, buddy. Try not to assault your cellmate on day 1. Story 15. Represented a client who pretended to be a doctor, not to impress women at bars or get better restaurant reservations, to sell steroids as cancer cures. Let that sink in. This man looked dying people in the eyes, People desperate for hope, grasping at any chance of survival, and sold them steroids, told them it would cure their cancer. Hundreds of thousands of dollars. That's what desperation costs, apparently. Some of them died, still believing he was trying to save them. The evidence was devastating. Text messages from victims thanking him for giving them hope. Photos of makeshift examination rooms in hotel suites. Fake medical degrees he'd printed himself. Payment records from people who'd emptied retirement accounts for his treatment. One woman sold her house to afford his cure, died 6 months later, her family bankrupt and broken. He'd even created fake medical studies, whole documents explaining how his special steroid blend attacked cancer cells, used enough medical terminology to sound legitimate to desperate people who wanted to believe. Sitting across from him in meetings, he'd discuss it like a business model: market penetration, customer retention, ROI. These weren't customers. They were dying human beings he'd converted into revenue streams. The worst part? He was smart enough to have become an actual doctor, had the intelligence, the charisma, the dedication, just chose to use it for evil instead. Pure evil. That's the only term for it. Not misguided, not desperate, not making bad choices. Evil. Some clients you defend because the system requires it. Due process matters, even for monsters. But this one made me go home and shower like I'd been contaminated. He got 20 years. Not enough for the families who buried loved ones still clutching his fake treatment plans. Sometimes I wonder about those final moments. Dying patients still believing the steroids would kick in any day. Still trusting the doctor who promised them tomorrow. There's a special place in hell for people who monetize hope and package death as medicine. He'll find out where when he gets there. Story 16. Had to go to the U.S. Attorney's Office to review evidence for a client. Child exploitation case. You know it's going to be bad, but you have to look. Due process requires it. Hundreds of images he traded online. That was expected. Horrible, but expected. Then I got to the photos of his own baby. His own baby. Close-ups he'd taken himself, shared with strangers on the internet. His own infant. Next folder, his neighbor's daughters, playing in their kiddie pool, just being kids on a summer day, while this predator photographed them over the fence. The prosecutor apologized for having to show me. Nobody should have to see this, she said. But that's the job. You look at the evidence, you provide representation, you go home and try to forget what human beings are capable of doing to children. In meetings, he'd deflect, blame his internet addiction, his childhood, his marriage problems. Everyone's fault but his. Never once said, I did something terrible. Never showed a flash of understanding about the lives he'd destroyed. His own baby was just content to him, trade material. Some clients you can find sympathy for. Addiction, mental illness, desperation, you can understand how people end up in dark places. But using your own infant as currency in a child exploitation ring, photographing innocent neighbors, then sitting across from your lawyer acting like you're the victim? No sympathy, no understanding, just the constitutional requirement that even monsters get lawyers. He got 15 years. His wife divorced him and moved states with the baby. The neighbors built a higher fence. And somewhere in a federal database, those images sit as evidence. His baby's first photo album, created for the worst possible reason. Some cases you defend because everyone deserves representation. Some clients you defend because the Constitution demands it. And some evidence you see because someone has to, even though it changes how you look at playground photos forever. Story 17. Jury duty from hell. My best friend was a U.S. Marshal for his first couple years, worked the courts during child exploitation trials. When they prosecute these cases, every image is evidence. Every single one. Thousands of photos, each entered as a separate exhibit, and the jury has to see them all. My friend learned quick. Don't look at the monitors. Just watch the room, do your job, keep your eyes anywhere but the screens. The jurors didn't have that option. He'd watch them break down in real time, grown adults starting to cry by image 50, shaking with rage by 100. By 500, people were running for the bathroom to vomit. One trial took 3 weeks instead of 1 because they needed so many recesses. Jurors couldn't handle more than 20-30 minutes at a time. One woman had a panic attack so severe they had to call EMTs. "Your Honor, we need another break." Every single hour. These weren't weak people. These were regular folks who thought jury duty meant deciding a robbery case or maybe assault. Instead, they got front row seats to the worst humanity has to offer, in high definition, hundreds of times over. One juror, big construction worker type, made it through day 1 stone-faced. Day 2, my friend found him in the hallway, sobbing. "I have a daughter that age," he kept saying. The worst part? The defendants usually sat there blank-faced. While jurors were breaking down, throwing up, begging for recesses, the accused would just watch, like it was normal TV. My friend said the guilty verdicts came back fast. After days of viewing that evidence, deliberation took minutes. Unanimous. Maximum sentences. But those jurors left changed. 12 random citizens who did their civic duty and got trauma in return. No therapy provided, no counseling, just thank you for your service and a lifetime of images they can't unsee. He transferred out after 2 years. Said watching good people get broken by evidence was worse than dealing with the criminals. Now he tells people to try to get out of jury duty if it's a federal child exploitation case. Tell them you can't be impartial. Say anything. Trust me. Because civic duty shouldn't include viewing thousands of images that make you vomit. And justice shouldn't require breaking the people trying to provide it. But that's the system. Someone has to look. Someone has to judge. Someone has to go home after and try to hug their kids without crying.